Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we kick off the new year with a review of the novel Krieg, a Death Korps story, by author Steve Lyons. As always with my reviews, this will be spoiler free, followed by a little spoiler reaction discussion at the end. But as always, with that said, let's begin by checking out the synopsis off the back of the book. Krieg is a dead world. Hundreds of years ago, it declared its independence from the Imperium of Man, and paid the price. One loyal soul defied its treacherous rulers, and laid the world to waste. From these ashes emerged a unique fighting force, forged and tempered in nuclear fire. Today, the Death Korps of Krieg lay siege to a captured hive city on the outskirts of the system-spanning Octarius War, in a desperate attempt to secure the cordon that stops untold masses of orcs and tyranids from spilling out into the Imperium at large. The Corpsmen are relentless, ruthless, implacable and unstoppable, even in the face of a war that seems unwinnable. How far will they go to achieve victory? And is history doomed to repeat itself? Now, it'll be no surprise to anyone if I say my biggest love when it comes to the 40k universe is the Adeptus Astartes. It was the first sight of them that drew me into the hobby as a kid, and that love has continued over as I've grown into the lore and the novels. I love pretty much every other faction, to varying degrees at least, but I've always found my most enjoyable reads have tended to follow that same mantra. I enjoy Astra Militarum reads, but I've rarely been captivated by them in quite the same way. However, a couple of my most recent Guard reads in particular have absolutely countered that trend. Catachan Devil in particular I really enjoyed, and I found Witchbringer to be a fantastic rare glimpse into life as a Militarum Psyker. So in coming into Krieg, I was certainly hopeful. Now, this novel has the task of giving us insight into the lives of the infamous Death Korps of Krieg. A pretty intriguing prospect considering these troopers are renowned for never removing their uniforms. And in order to do this, the author tackles the Death Korps by essentially giving us two stories in one. One is a narrative following a current era war, the Imperium's attempts to win back a fallen hive from the Orc menace. And the other revolves around Krieg's ancient history, what led to Krieg becoming what it is today. And without going into specific spoilers, as the synopsis suggests, there are narrative similarities that tie the two together. And this is predominantly done by the similarities of their situation, and with the involvement and presence of the Inquisition. Now, of the two narratives, I found myself more invested and enjoying the current. Firstly, the premise was different to the usually expected scenario. Normally, you'd expect to find the Imperium putting up its staunch defense of the hive, battling back and holding out against overwhelming odds. Yet here, you find the Imperium, and more importantly the Militarum, in a different situation. Having lost the hive, giving the Greenskins a foothold, the Guard are now faced with the prospect of the very world's downfall. And this is where Krieg becomes involved, arriving as reinforcements to the already embattled Cadians. Now, my immediate reaction was to think just how many Cadians can there be left in the galaxy? It feels like they're on every war zone across the Imperium, but this notion is actually covered really well by the author, as the Cadians themselves are fully aware of how just a finite people they are now. And it works as an absolutely fantastic contrast to that of the Death Korps of Krieg, who throw countless lives into achieving their objective. With each loss the Cadians suffer, you feel it. They feel it. Each life has become a precious commodity. Yet for Krieg, it's a nameless number, a matter of attrition. And so in that way the Cadians were and are actually the perfect choice to show us the differences in the Krieg nature. Now you get to see the full spectrum of what that Krieg way of war is, from the Cadian eyes and some Inquisitor viewpoints. You get to see how not only this emotionless decision making can benefit the Imperium, but also perhaps in some ways be a con. Of course you get to see the Death Korps in their element, trench and siege warfare. And yes, it all has a very similar feeling to that of a World War I battlefield. The pounding siege cannons, the manned trenches, gaining the extra ground before moving the trenches forward, except it's all evolved to be within the 40k universe. While this may have familiar hallmarks to any history buffs out there, it's entirely different to the Cadian ways of war, and what us the readers usually gets to see, so it actually felt very refreshing and new in many ways, and was pretty darn exciting to boot. The moment the Krieg Death Korps go over the top as it were in a counterattack, left me as momentarily stunned as the Cadians were. The author deserves fantastic credit for bringing the Death Korps to life, as though they are rarely spoken, faceless soldiers, seen virtually entirely from others' viewpoints. Through their deeds and actions, their completely selfless and absolute dedication to duty, you absolutely become completely enthralled by them. At least I did, rooting for them every step of the way. Now, alongside this, still contained within the current timeline, you get to see the story of the Inquisitor I mentioned, and he has his own reasons and objective tied up with the Hive. His story, as is usually the way with Inquisitors, is a bit more of a slow burn, acting as more a subplot for the most part. However, as it unwinds and develops, I found myself becoming more and more invested in him, and his objective as well. The tie between him and the Death Korps is seamlessly done. I felt like these two intertwined stories worked very well together, and very naturally came into play. Now, for the past narrative, however, in many ways it's a much more focused story, centering around a few important characters who were central to not only Krieg's uprising, but also the civil war that followed. This is a more story-orientated narrative, attempting to reveal and unravel the truth of Krieg's past. And on that premise, it's quite surprising I didn't find this half quite as enjoyable. But I think that's a testament to the strong storyline and presence of the Death Korps themselves in the future or current half. This history tale, as it were, is still a complete and rounded story, and has a particularly strong and interesting character at its heart. However, I think perhaps it didn't quite grip me as much, is because it felt less Krieg, for want of a better description. Now, to try and explain that, this former history of Krieg felt very much like it could have been any world within the Imperium. And perhaps that's really the beauty and essence of it. Any Imperial world out there could very easily end up just like Krieg. However, in reading a story about the Death Korps of Krieg, you really want to become entirely immersed in that nature. And as great as learning about their history was, I found myself at times wanting to get back to seeing the Death Korps in action. But again, it was definitely interesting, and again, it's not to say that half of the story wasn't enjoyable, because it was. I personally just enjoyed the current time portions more myself, because I was completely engrossed in them. Overall, you probably could have even expanded both stories into their own fully fledged reads. It certainly felt like both had strong characters and plots at their heart. Again, particularly the Inquisitor. I think his adventure could have been its complete own story in its own right, and that maybe would have given a bit more time for the main and side characters to get a little bit more development. As it was, I did feel a few of the side characters took away time I would have preferred spent elsewhere. And honestly, I would probably struggle to remember their names now. But with that said, honestly, these are minor gripes to what is a fantastic read. The author Steve Lyons for me did an unbelievable job at bringing the Death Korps of Krieg to life, who are the undoubted stars of this story. Score-wise, I'd give this an undoubted 4 out of 5. A great read or listen. The current era, with the contrast between the Cadians and the Death Korps, the Inquisitor's adventure, and a plot that doesn't play out the way you expect it to, is an undoubted 5 out of 5 blessed by the Emperor. I honestly loved it, and was always eager to get back to it. The history parts, seeing and learning how Krieg came to be, was a thoroughly enjoyable read in its own right. Just something that didn't match the excitement or intrigue of me of the other timeline, landing closer to a 3 out of 5. A perfectly good read. So overall, I'd say a 4 out of 5 is about fair. It's great from beginning to end. That Death Korps of Krieg kill team I've got now may just have to become an army, because I absolutely love them. If you're thinking about this one, I cannot recommend it enough. But that's it for the spoiler-free review, everyone. Now just a few discussion points for those that have already read the book. Okay, now I don't know about anyone else, but I absolutely love that final quarter, diving into the Inquisitor mission with the kill team. That mission to infiltrate the Hive was fantastic. I really wish we could have seen more of it. It's the sign of a great story. Within a few pages of writing, I was completely invested in this faceless, nameless kill team, wanting each and every one of them to make it through with the Inquisitor. Every time one of them fell, I was a little more gutted each time. And again, that's testament to the strong writing, the selfless sacrifice to end it, the Krieg guardsmen staying behind with the bomb, just sitting there waiting, alone in the dark. It really summarized everything the Death Korps are, and his final end, listening to the orcs gradually break in, waiting for as long as he could before setting off his grenade. It was absolutely gripping, and honestly almost got me a little emotional. I also really liked how this story didn't play out how you was expecting it to. After making the assault into the Hive, I think we were all expecting the standard Imperial victory. But no, they were repulsed. They had to retreat back to the trenches. And I found that a fantastic twist, as it left me wondering where else the story could go. I think that happening is what increased the sense of anticipation and trepidation with the kill team's mission after. Because we had already seen them fail, now it could truly happen at any time. Seeing the stark contrast between the Cadian and the Krieg colonels was another particular highlight. How despite being both men of the military, even a veteran Cadian can be taken aback by just how matter of fact the Krieg really are. Seeing that sense of reputation between the regiments, the Krieg just performing their duty, but the Cadians feeling the need to show their own reputation, to live up to the name of Cadia. It was a great little subplot that added not only to the narrative, but also the distinctness of the Death Korps. So much so that when the Cadian commander died, you felt that loss. You felt how much it cost the Cadians, but also comparatively how it wouldn't have cost the Death Korps. How for them it surely would have been the next man up. Now, we got a few revelations into Krieg's past, but nothing that really blew me away. So nothing that really stands out for me to want to discuss. However, I did find it intriguing that the Inquisition is essentially choosing to turn a blind eye to the truth behind Krieg's population. Pretty interesting considering they are so petty when it comes to their grudges with the Astartes. I think I'd quite enjoy seeing some more Inquisitor involvement with the Militarum. It adds a different perspective than the competitive one with the Space Marines. But anyway, as always everyone, what did you think? Did you enjoy this one as much as me? Did you enjoy it more? Or did you enjoy it less? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? With that said, I am off. And I'll see you all again real soon.